Hello, my friend, and welcome back to Mr. Arthur Advice. I want you to sit down for this one, maybe with a cup of tea in your hands, because today we are going to talk about something that keeps so many parents awake at night. Something so many of you have written to me about in messages I read late in the evening, messages that sometimes bring tears to my own eyes. You ask me, Arthur, why doesn't my son call anymore? You ask me, Arthur, my daughter used to visit every Sunday, and now it's been months. What did I do wrong? And my dear friend, before we go any further, I want you to hear something clearly. This is not a video about blame. This is not a video where I tell you it's all your fault, and it's not a video where I tell you it's all their fault either. Because the truth, as it almost always is with families, sits quietly somewhere in between, hidden behind pride, behind fear, behind exhaustion, behind love that never actually disappeared but simply forgot how to speak. I want to tell you about a woman named Anne. Anne was 71 years old, and for 30 years, Sunday dinner at her house was sacred. Her daughter Carol would come with the grandchildren. There would be roast chicken, there would be laughter spilling out the kitchen window, and Anne lived for those Sundays the way some people live for Christmas morning. Then Anne's husband passed away, and slowly, without either of them quite noticing when it began, the Sundays became every other Sunday, then once a month, then a phone call instead. Anne told me she used to sit by the window on Sunday afternoons, watching cars pass, wondering if one of them might turn into her driveway. She said the silence in that house became so loud it almost had a sound of its own. And in her heart, a story began to form. A story that said, "My daughter has moved on. My daughter has a new life now, and I am simply not part of it anymore." That story hurt her terribly. It hurt her so much that when Carol finally did call, Anne's voice would come out sharp, almost accusing, without her even meaning it to. "Oh, so you remembered I exist," she would say, trying to make it sound like a joke, but Carol could hear the ache underneath it. And here is the part that broke my heart when Anne told me. Carol wasn't pulling away because she stopped loving her mother. Carol was drowning. 2 teenagers, a job that had become more demanding, a marriage that needed tending, and a grief of her own for the father she had lost. A grief she had never fully allowed herself to feel because she was too busy holding everyone else together. Every time she thought about visiting, a small voice inside her said, "I don't have the energy to be fully present the way Mom deserves, so maybe it's better if I wait until I do." And that waiting, my friend, turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Not because love had left the room, but because guilt had quietly taken its place at the table instead. This, my dear friend, is the first truth I want you to sit with today. When adult children pull away, it is rarely because they stopped loving their parents. Far more often, it is because they are overwhelmed, and overwhelmed people retreat into the smallest possible circle just to survive their days. Think about your own children's lives for a moment. Many of them are caught in what people now call the sandwich generation, caring for their own children while also beginning to worry about you. They are working longer hours than we ever did. They are managing finances that feel less secure than ours once did. They are exhausted in a way that has almost become the normal condition of adult life today. And when a person is exhausted, the relationships that get set aside first are almost never the ones that feel urgent or demanding. They are the ones that feel safe, the ones where love is assumed rather than questioned. And that is the strange cruelty hidden inside a strong parent-child bond. Because you were always there, because your love never had conditions attached to it, your children may unconsciously believe that love will simply wait for them. They are not choosing coworkers over you because coworkers matter more. They are choosing coworkers because a coworker's patience feels finite, and yours, in their minds, feels endless. It is not fair to you. I know that, but understanding it can soften the wound because it tells you something important. Their absence is not a verdict on your worth. It is a symptom of their exhaustion. Now let me tell you about a man named Walter, because his story shows a different kind of reason, one that is harder to talk about, but I think you deserve the full truth today. Walter was 78, sharp-minded, proud, a retired engineer who had spent his whole life being the strong one, the fixer, the man everyone came to for advice. His son Michael had once visited every other weekend without fail. But over the last 2 years, those visits had become rare, and when Michael did come, he seemed tense, quiet, eager to leave earlier than he used to. Walter assumed Michael had simply grown distant, maybe even embarrassed by him. But one evening, after a difficult conversation, Michael finally told his father the truth, with tears in his eyes that surprised them both. He said, "Dad, every time I walk into your house now, I see how much slower you've become. I see you gripping the counter when you stand up. I see you forgetting words mid-sentence. And I can't breathe when I'm there, because it feels like I'm watching you disappear in slow motion, and I don't know how to hold that." My friend, this broke something open in Walter, because he had never once considered that his own aging, something he had quietly grieved himself, was also something his son was grieving from the outside, in a way that felt unbearable to witness up close. Michael wasn't avoiding his father because he loved him less. He was avoiding him because watching a parent age forces an adult child to confront their own mortality, their own fear of loss, and the terrifying reality that one day, the parent who always answered the phone will not answer it anymore. Some adult children handle that fear by drawing closer, but many others handle it by pulling away, because distance feels, in some confused emotional way, like protection from a pain they are not ready to face. I want you to hold both of these stories in your mind, Anne's and Walter's, because together they show something crucial. The silence from your children is very often not about you at all. It is about what is happening inside them, quietly, invisibly, in rooms of their hearts they have not even fully opened to themselves. But my friend, I would not be honest with you if I only told you the tender reasons. Because sometimes, and I say this with as much gentleness as I can, the distance is also shaped by something coming from our side of the relationship. And if we truly want reconnection, we have to be brave enough to look at that too. I once spoke with a woman named Dorothy, 82 years old, deeply intelligent, deeply lonely, and deeply unaware of a pattern she had fallen into. Dorothy loved her granddaughter fiercely, but every single visit, without fail, somehow turned into a review of the granddaughter's life choices. Her job wasn't secure enough. Her apartment wasn't clean enough. Her boyfriend didn't seem serious enough. Dorothy believed she was simply caring, simply offering the wisdom of experience, the way her own mother once had. But her granddaughter began describing visits to her friends as going to get graded. And slowly, an invisible calculation started happening before every visit. Was the emotional cost of an afternoon at Grandma's worth the criticism she knew was coming? Often, the honest answer became no. Dorothy never once raised her voice. She never once said an unkind word directly. But criticism dressed as concern is still criticism, and after enough years of it, even a loving grandchild begins protecting their peace by simply visiting less. And there is another quiet pattern I have seen again and again in families, one that deserves to be named honestly. Guilt, when used as a tool to bring children closer, almost always pushes them further away. A sentence like, "I suppose I'll just sit here alone again," said with a sigh heavy enough to fill the whole room, may come from genuine loneliness. I understand that ache completely. But to the person receiving it, it does not sound like an invitation. It sounds like an obligation wrapped in sadness. And human beings, even the most loving ones, instinctively begin avoiding situations that consistently make them feel like they are failing someone they love. The tragic irony is this: the parent who says these things is usually the one aching most desperately for connection. But the very words meant to draw children closer are the ones quietly teaching those children to keep their distance, because every visit starts to feel less like time together and more like a debt being repaid. So, my dear friend, if you recognize even a small piece of yourself in Dorothy or in that sigh by the phone, please do not let shame swallow you right now. I am not telling you this to make you feel guilty. Guilt has done quite enough damage in this story already. I am telling you this because awareness is the doorway to change, and change, even at 70, even at 80, is always still possible. The heart does not have an expiration date on its ability to grow. There is another story I think about often, one that taught me something I had never fully understood until I heard it. A man named Raymond, 80 years old, a widower for nearly a decade, once told me that his son had stopped visiting almost entirely after a single conversation 2 years earlier. Raymond could not, for the life of him, understand what had happened. He replayed that conversation in his mind 100 times, searching for the offense, and found nothing. It was only later, through his daughter-in-law, that he learned the truth. His son had confided something painful that day, a struggle at work, a fear of being let go after 20 years at the same company. And Raymond, trying to be helpful in the way fathers of his generation often were taught to be helpful, had responded with solutions instead of comfort. Have you updated your resume? Have you spoken to your supervisor directly? Have you considered that maybe you are not adapting quickly enough to how things are done now? Every sentence was meant with love. Every sentence landed as judgment. His son did not need a father who could fix the problem. He needed a father who could simply sit beside him inside the fear for a moment, without immediately trying to organize it into a solution. When Raymond finally understood this, he called his son and said something he had never once said in 80 years of life. "I'm sorry. I think I made you feel like a failure when you came to me needing comfort, and that was never what I meant." His son wept on the phone. Not because the apology fixed everything instantly, but because for the first time he felt truly seen by his father, rather than simply managed by him. My friend, this is worth sitting with. Sometimes our children do not need our wisdom nearly as much as they need our presence. There is a difference between a father who says, "Here is what you should do," and a father who says, "That sounds incredibly hard and I'm here." The second sentence rarely fixes the practical problem, but it very often fixes the relationship. And in the long run, the relationship is the thing that determines whether they come back to your door at all. I also want to speak honestly about something that touches so many families, something people rarely say out loud. Sometimes the distance did not begin recently at all. Sometimes it began decades ago, in a childhood home where love was present but expressed in ways that left invisible marks. A strict household, a parent who worked long hours and missed recitals and ball games without meaning any harm by it, simply trying to provide. A moment of harsh discipline that felt, to a small child, larger than it was ever intended to be. These things accumulate quietly over the years, and by the time children become adults with families of their own, they are often unconsciously choosing a different kind of closeness than the one they experienced growing up, sometimes without even realizing they are doing it. If this describes part of your story, I want you to know something important. You do not have to carry the full weight of every parenting decision made 30 or 40 years ago, when you yourselves were exhausted, under-resourced, and doing the very best you could with what you had been given. But it can still help enormously, more than almost anything else, to simply acknowledge it plainly to your adult child. Not with excessive self-blame, which can make them feel responsible for managing your guilt, but with simple honesty. I know I wasn't always present the way I wish I had been. I was doing my best, but I know it wasn't always enough, and I'm sorry for the moments that hurt you. You would be astonished, my friend, at how much healing lives inside a sentence like that. Children, even grown children in their 40s and 50s, often spend a lifetime waiting for exactly those words, and when they finally arrive, entire walls that took decades to build can begin softening within a single conversation. There is yet another pattern worth naming, one that shows up especially often once grandchildren enter the picture. Many parents, without realizing it, quietly insert themselves into their children's parenting decisions. A comment about how the grandchildren are being raised. A suggestion about discipline or diet or screen time or schooling, offered with the very best intentions, wrapped in the authority of experience. But to a young parent, already exhausted and already second-guessing themselves every single day, these comments can feel like a verdict rather than support. I met a woman named Susan whose daughter-in-law, Grace, had gradually stopped bringing the grandchildren over as often as she once had. Susan was heartbroken, certain that Grace simply did not like her. But when Susan's own son finally explained it gently, the truth was far more human than that. Every visit, Susan would comment, lightly, almost jokingly, about how the children were dressed too warmly, or not warmly enough, or how in her day, children ate what was put in front of them without complaint. None of it was said with cruelty. All of it was said with love, the way advice often is. But Grace had begun to dread the visits, feeling evaluated every single time, feeling like a guest inspected in her own parenting rather than a mother trusted with her own choices. Susan, once she understood this, made a decision that changed everything. She decided that unless a child's safety was genuinely at risk, she would offer no unsolicited opinions at all, only warmth, only presence, only delight in simply being with her grandchildren exactly as they were being raised. Within months, the visits increased again, not because Susan had become a different person, but because she had made her home and her presence feel safe again rather than evaluative. Now let us talk about the biggest lie hiding underneath all of this, the lie that quietly convinces so many parents to give up hope entirely. The lie says, if my children truly loved me, they would simply know to call. They would simply know to visit. I shouldn't have to ask. My friend, I understand why this belief forms. It feels like love should not require instructions. But real love, lasting love, especially between generations living entirely different lives under entirely different pressures, almost always requires communication, clarity, and yes, sometimes even a gentle invitation. Silence is not a language anyone can accurately interpret. When you go quiet, hoping they will notice and reach out first, they are often, at that very same moment, assuming your silence means you are simply busy, or content, or perhaps even relieved to have a little space. Two people can sit in the exact same silence and construct two completely opposite stories about what it means. This is how families drift, not through one dramatic explosion, but through years of both sides quietly waiting for the other to go first. Let me tell you how Anne's story continued, because I think you deserve to see that these patterns can be gently rewritten. After months of aching silence, Anne finally did something that terrified her. Instead of waiting for Carol to call, and instead of greeting her next call with that familiar sharp edge, Anne picked up the phone herself and said something entirely different. She said, "Carol, I miss you. I'm not upset with you, I just miss you, and I wanted you to know that." No sighing, no mention of how long it had been, just honesty, offered without weapons attached to it. Carol later told her mother that this single phone call changed everything, because for the first time in over a year, she didn't feel like she was walking toward an obligation. She felt like she was walking toward love that simply wanted her presence, without conditions, without a scoreboard. They began with small things. A 15-minute phone call every Wednesday evening. Nothing more. Nothing demanding. Carol found that 15 minutes far easier to give than the full Sunday dinners of the past, and slowly, from that small and sustainable seed, something larger began to regrow. Within a year, Sundays returned, not identical to before, but real and warm and unhurried by guilt. And Walter, in his own way, found his path back too. Once he understood that Michael's absence came from fear rather than indifference, Walter did something that surprised his son deeply. Instead of hiding his physical struggles behind pride, the way he always had, he began speaking about them honestly, calmly, even with a little humor. "Yes, my knees are terrible now, and yes, I forget names sometimes, and none of that means I'm disappearing. It just means I'm 78 instead of 40. That honesty, spoken without shame, gave Michael permission to stop looking away. Fear often grows largest in the dark, in the things left unspoken. Once Walter brought his aging into the light and treated it with acceptance rather than denial, Michael found it far easier to sit beside him in it, rather than flee from it. I think, too, of a woman named Eleanor, whose story I have kept close to my heart for a long time, because it shows how much can change, even after years of near-total silence. Eleanor was 76, and her son Peter had barely spoken to her for almost 3 years, following an argument at a family gathering that had spiraled far beyond its original subject, the way old arguments so often do, pulling in every unresolved hurt from decades before until nobody could even remember what had started it. Both of them were proud. Both of them believed the other should apologize first. And so 3 years passed. birthdays uncelebrated together, holidays spent in separate homes, a grandchild growing from a toddler into a schoolchild that Eleanor barely recognized in the photographs Peter's wife occasionally, quietly, sent her. Eleanor told me that the hardest part was not the argument itself, it was the silence that followed, because silence has a way of hardening into identity. The longer it continued, the more she began telling herself, "This is simply how things are now. This is simply who we are to each other now." And that story, once it settled into her bones, felt almost impossible to challenge. But one evening, watching her grandson's photograph arrive on her phone, a boy she had not held in nearly 3 years, something in her broke open. Not anger, grief. A grief so large it finally overwhelmed the pride that had been protecting her all along. She wrote her son a letter, not a text message, an actual letter, because she wanted him to hold something real in his hands. She did not relitigate the old argument. She did not explain who had been right. She wrote only this: "I miss you more than my pride ever let me say. I don't need you to agree with me about what happened. I only need you to know that you are still my son, and I still love you, and I would like to know my grandson before he grows up entirely without me in his life." Peter did not respond immediately. 3 weeks passed, and Eleanor feared she had reached out too late. But then, one Saturday afternoon, her phone rang, and it was Peter's voice. Quiet, a little shaky, saying simply, "Mom, can we start again?" My friend, 3 years of silence did not heal in a single phone call. It took many months of careful, patient rebuilding, small visits at first, careful conversations that avoided old wounds until enough trust had regrown to eventually address them. But it began, entirely, with one woman deciding that her pride mattered less than her son's presence in her life. I tell you this story because I know some of you watching tonight are sitting inside years of silence, far longer than a single missed Sunday, and I want you to know that even after years, even after painful arguments neither side has fully recovered from, a door can still open. It rarely opens through proving who was right. It almost always opens through someone choosing love over pride, and being willing to go first. My dear friend, if you are living inside this silence right now, I want to offer you something practical, something you can actually hold on to tonight. First, release the scoreboard. Stop counting who called last, who visited last, who owes whom an apology. That scoreboard has never once, in the history of families, healed anything. It only keeps wounds open longer. Second, replace guilt with warmth in every message you send. Instead of, "I suppose you're too busy for your old mother," try, "I was just thinking about you today and wanted you to know I love you." The second message costs you nothing, and it opens a door instead of building a wall. Third, ask for small things instead of large ones. A 15-minute phone call is something a busy adult child can actually say yes to without dread. A demand for an entire Sunday, when their week is already collapsing under its own weight, often meets silent, guilty avoidance instead. Small, consistent connection almost always rebuilds trust faster than big, occasional gestures ever could. Fourth, and this one is harder, but please hear it. Let go of the critiques, even the loving ones, even the ones that come from genuine wisdom. Let your children's choices be theirs to make and theirs to learn from. Save your words for encouragement, and you will find, almost like magic, that they begin seeking your company rather than quietly bracing for it. And fifth, speak your own aging and your own needs honestly, without either hiding them behind stubborn pride or wielding them as guilt. There is a profound difference between saying, "I need help sometimes now, and I'm not afraid to say so," and saying, "Nobody ever helps me, you all just leave me here." The first invites closeness. The second, even when the pain behind it is completely real, tends to push people further away. I know some of you watching this are thinking, "Arthur, I have tried all of this, and still my child stays distant, and my heart truly aches for you, because I know that not every story resolves as gently as Anne's did, or as quickly as Walter's. Sometimes there are deeper wounds beneath the surface, old conflicts from decades ago that were never properly healed, and sometimes an adult child's distance has causes that have nothing to do with you at all. causes tied entirely to their own unresolved pain, their own mental health, their own private battles you may never fully see. If that is your story, please do not carry the entire weight of their choices on your own shoulders. You can open every door with love, and it is still true that another person must choose to walk through it. Your responsibility is only ever to leave the door open with warmth. Whether they walk through it, and when, is a chapter that belongs to them. But I want to leave you tonight with something Anne said to me, months after that first honest phone call to her daughter. She said, "I used to think my children stopped visiting because they stopped needing me. But I've realized now they will always need me, just differently than before. They needed me to hold the whole world together when they were small. Now they need me to simply exist without demanding it of them, to let them come back on their own time, in their own way, and trust that when they do, the love will still be there waiting, exactly as it always was." That, my friend, may be the deepest truth hiding inside this entire subject. The relationship between a parent and a grown child does not end when the visits become less frequent. It simply changes shape. And your task, in this new season of life, is not to force it back into its old shape through guilt or grief or grasping. Your task is to keep your own heart soft, keep your own door open, and trust that love, real love, the kind that built an entire childhood, rarely disappears completely. It only waits, sometimes longer than we would wish, for the right moment to walk back through the door. So tonight, before you sleep, I want you to ask yourself something gently, the way I always ask you to. Not, "Why don't they call me?" but instead, "What is one small, warm, guilt-free thing I could say to them tomorrow?" Perhaps it is simply, "I love you, and I hope you're taking care of yourself." No expectation attached, no sigh hidden inside it, just love, offered freely, the way you offered it to them the very first day they were born, when they gave you absolutely nothing back yet, and you loved them anyway, completely, without conditions. My dear friend, thank you for spending this time with me today here on Mr. Arthur Advice. If this conversation touched something in you, if you recognized your own story inside Anne's silence, or Walter's fear, or Dorothy's well-meaning criticism, I would love for you to share your own experience in the comments below. Tell me your age, tell me where you're writing from, and tell me, has there been a season of distance in your own family, and how did you find your way back, or are you still finding it? Your story might be exactly what another lonely parent needs to read tonight. Please subscribe so we can continue walking through these seasons of life together, one honest conversation at a time. Take care of your heart, keep your door open, and I will see you again very soon, my dear friend.